So one other thing I'd really like to get your views on is the Trump-South Africa row. So everyone will, of course, seen Cyril Ramaphosa, the president of South Africa, being summoned to Oval Office and shown what Trump said to be images and video of what's going on in South Africa and what he called a white genocide. Ramaphosa denied this was happening, of course. But among the images there was Julius Malema, the leader of the EFF, the Economic Freedom Fighters, the far left group of Marxists chanting "Kill the Boer" to an entire stadium full of people, which is obviously very shocking.
Kill the Boer, the farmer! Kill the Boer, the farmer!
But of course, the reaction from much of the media has been to say, there's no such thing as a white genocide in South Africa, and that Trump was just playing to his base, and that he was completely reprehensible for even suggesting this was the case. What did you make of this episode in general? And in particular, there's this question about whether you are allowed to call something a white genocide or a genocide or not. Because it is actually pretty clear that, of course, there's already a high murder rate in South Africa, but that Afrikaner farmers in particular are murdered at a significantly higher rate than that, and that they are, to some extent, being targeted for racial reasons.
Yeah, absolutely. It's interesting. This argument has been AfriForum, it's this sort of Afrikaner advocacy organization, has been making this point about the farm murders now for, I think, at least 10 years. And the counter argument has always been this very unsophisticated response that, Africa has a high murder rate, but Boer farmers aren't being targeted at any rates above the ambient, violence in South Africa. This is just a white nationalist talking point or something. And it's not that difficult to show that we don't have perfect data, but that actually the murder rates of Boer farmers in South Africa seems to be significantly higher, maybe twice the ambient murder rate. A lot of the farmer murders cluster in certain geographic regions, suggesting there's local initiatives or gangs at work or something. I don't really know, but it doesn't look organic. It doesn't look natural to me. It looks like these farm murders, they cluster. They seem to be something that's really happening on the ground, and it's the response to this has always been kind of lazy. Now, if the genocide is a highly politicized construct, so whether targeted murders or racialized campaigns always have to be genocidal, I don't know. The word can be inflammatory and also provokes counter-arguments from the left. The progressive left wants to own this term and exercise a monopoly over it and define who is being genocided and who is not. And there's a political orthodoxy in play which says that, genocides are only suffered by victim ethnicities, and perpetrator ethnicities like the Boers, colonizers, can never be responsible for them. So all of the genocide, the word invokes all of these complex political debates, but it's pretty obvious that there's a racial political targeting of Boer farmers in South Africa. Mulema, the entire EFF movement, basically seems to be inciting to violence at almost every political rally. It's not a very good situation.
And obviously we've seen something similar with the Zelensky bust-up with Trump. What do you make of this new diplomatic strategy of inviting people into the Oval Office to have a go at them?
I don't know. It's Trump is a showman. He's interested in providing good television. I think he even said at the Zelensky meeting that at least this will be good TV, and that this is part of how Trump enacts politics and sort of attracts attention to his specific causes now. And I think also, I know a lot of I have many sympathies for Trump's presidency myself, but there's definitely a huge amount of attention to messaging and to also kind of populist entertainment aspect of these politics in the United States, and that's not always at odds with his political goals, of course. But I also do wonder about the strategy here. Is this going to do a lot to change events on the ground in South Africa? I don't really know. I also don't really know what Trump's specific strategy might be, if that's really what he wants to do or something else. One thing I thought was very curious was the acceptance of a very small token number of refugees to the United States from South Africa. I think it was 47 or something. Boer farmers who felt they were persecuted and took advantage of this refugee status that had been extended to them, and how this provoked from the left just very discrediting sort of outcries. complaining that this was just unacceptable. Accepting Boer refugees was just a slap in the face to oppressed global South populations, and really just I felt very kind of mask off and embarrassing political points to be making. That I thought that was sort of a messaging coup for the Trump administration.
And I think there's something very emotive about the South Africa situation that liberals and the progressive left are really concerned to deny, which is that essentially there are many of these kinds of racialized problems. Do you have a sense of why that's something they feel so strongly about?
There's this construct that's been in play throughout the West since 1945, really, and it constructs victim ethnicities and perpetrator ethnicities. And these are kind of the only ethnic categories that are allowed to persist in the liberal imaginary right now. And it causes a lot of dissonance when a perpetrator ethnicity suffers racialized crimes or attacks, right? And so drawing attention to this causes a lot of anxiety and a lot of, almost disconfirmed expectancy on the left. It sort of seems to contradict almost religious or para-religious doctrines that they hold. And it causes them to speak and say things that I find sort of really shocking and uncomfortable, about how people who are, of course, being killed or victimized don't deserve victim status, or no one should extend them help or assistance. It's very off-putting and unattractive.
And just to go back to the refugee question finally, of course, the way that's generally presented is as this universalistic idea, right? It's people, you have to let people in wherever they are if they're being persecuted. And in any case, America is very rich, so why not let, millions of refugees in over its southern border, for instance? And so it is really quite jarring to see suddenly, actually, it turns out it's not so universalistic, and there's this negative disposition towards certain refugees.
Absolutely. Now 47 Boers or 60 or however many there were, now suddenly huge problem, massive controversy, Marco Rubio being grilled by congressional committees about this choice for a two-digit number, and this is something, point we've also made in Europe for years, which is that refugees, again, there's this constructed universal, everyone has a right to asylum, it's just persecuted peoples, anybody can come here. But in practice, we've created a class of people who have just unique, quite amazing rights. They can travel all around Europe, draw benefits from literally any country. I can't do that. You can't do that. There are statistics we can look and see the kinds of people who try to claim asylum here, and every year, about 12 from the United States try to do it. It's sort of funny. I don't know who those people are, but they're always rejected, of course. You have to come from the right places, and it's a very particular kind of thing. It's not universal as it's constructed.
I suppose not to be too one-sided here, is there also evidence of a role reversal of how the right views these refugees? I mean, of course, the argument that conservatism will generally make is that refugees could be a drain on the economy and don't necessarily integrate very well and all of these kinds of things. Are those arguments being ignored in this case, do you think? Is there an equivalent hypocrisy?
Of course, one could argue, of course, that's possible. I don't, just to be totally fair, I would say that if we were taking in 60 refugees a year to Germany from Afghanistan or whatever, I don't think anybody would care about that either. At least on the right, I don't think that would be a massive concern. The problem has always been the enormous numbers, So yes, of course, there's aspects of the anti-immigration critique vanish when they're Boer farmers, but then again, the numbers are very small. I would personally be opposed to the en masse resettlement of Boers in Germany or other Western countries. Millions of people, I just don't, I'm opposed to mass migration, period. A few thousand refugees or something is fine, but I would not be willing to resettle entire populations. I don't think that's humane. I think it's not how government should work. Those aren't decisions politicians have even the power or jurisdiction to make, period.